During my university years, I worked at an old-fashioned bookstore. Located on the edge of town, it was a place filled with abundant books and antiques, attracting all kinds of readers. I mostly worked at night since I had classes during the day. Although working in the bookstore at night was a bit lonely, I enjoyed the tranquility, which allowed me to read in my spare time. It was a cold winter night with the wind howling outside. I was sitting alone behind the cash register, flipping through a book about folk tales. That night, there were few customers, and I was alone most of the time. Around 9 p.m., a man in a black coat entered the bookstore. He wore a hat that covered most of his face, revealing only the lower half. The man didn't greet anyone and went straight to the shelves to browse. I didn't mind and continued reading my book. After a while, I looked up and saw him staring at a particular shelf, the one with books about supernatural phenomena and ghost stories. He seemed particularly interested in those books, carefully examining each one. As time passed, the bookstore was about to close. I went over and politely reminded him that we were closing soon. He didn't respond, just nodded his head and continued browsing. I felt a bit uneasy but returned to my position. Eventually, he chose a few books and approached the cash register. I noticed his hands were trembling strangely, and his voice was deep and hoarse, almost inaudible. I heard a faint knocking at the back door as I was about to turn off the lights and leave. I paused, thinking it might be the wind moving something. However, the knocking grew louder, accompanied by a low moaning sound. My heart started racing. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, but my intuition told me it wasn't that simple. I slowly walked towards the back door, each step feeling incredibly heavy. As I approached, I heard a low, slightly hurried voice outside, but I couldn't make out what it was saying. I got closer to the door and asked softly, "Who's there?" but there was no response, just the continuous knocking. I mustered up the courage, unlocked the door, and slowly opened it. Standing outside was the man who had bought books in the store earlier. His face was blurred in the darkness, but I could feel his eyes fixed on me. He extended a hand, holding a piece of paper. I took it, and it read some unsettling words. "Can you see them? They have always been here." A chill ran down my spine. I looked up at the man, but he had already disappeared into the night. I closed and locked the door, my heart pounding. I quickly went back to the cash register, intending to call the police. Just then, I heard the sound of books falling from the shelves. I turned around to see the supernatural and ghost story books scattered on the floor. My heart was racing. I picked up the phone to call the police, but there was only silence on the other end. I tried calling again, but still no sound. Then, I heard footsteps upstairs, heavy and slow. The bookstore didn't have a second floor, so where were those sounds coming from? I felt an unexplainable panic. I decided not to wait any longer, grabbed my things, and quickly left the store. As soon as I was out the door, I started running until I felt safe enough to stop. I looked back at the bookstore, the windows emitting a dim light. I knew I shouldn't look back, but I couldn't help myself. At that moment, I saw the silhouette of the man in the window, just standing there, quietly watching me. I turned and continued running until I felt completely safe. When I got home, I immediately called my manager and told him everything. He sounded shocked, told me not to come in the next day, and assured me he would handle the situation. The next day, I learned that my manager had called the police and checked everything in the bookstore. But apart from the scattered books and my story, nothing unusual was found. The police investigated the surrounding area but found no trace of the mysterious man. This incident had a profound impact on me. I began to doubt everything I saw and heard, unsure if it was reality or my imagination. Regardless, the events of that night were etched in my memory, becoming an eternal mystery. I never returned to work at that bookstore and never saw that man again. In my last year of high school, I worked as a delivery person for a popular fast food restaurant in my town. My friends also worked there, but we were deliberately scheduled on different shifts to prevent us from hanging out, which took away all the fun. However, the pay was good. Normally, I don't have interesting stories about my work days, but that night was an exception. It was a weekend, and I was scheduled to work until 10 p.m. Orders were coming in continuously, so I was delivering them one after another. I would go in, pick up the package, drive to the house, and then repeat the process. I think it was around 9 p.m. when I received this particular order, but I can't be sure because I was almost delivering unconsciously by that time. I grabbed the package, opened the GPS for the address, and started driving. Halfway there, I realized this road was taking me in a different direction. I had been on this road before, but there aren't many houses here, so most orders are in another direction. I drove on, not thinking much of it, until the GPS showed I was only a minute from my destination. I looked around, wondering where I could possibly reach in a minute. There was nothing but trees and the road, no houses or stores, nothing. Regardless, I drove to the arrival point indicated by the GPS, just a quarter-mile further. I parked my car by the roadside, looked around in case I missed something, and then called the customer. After a while, the phone was answered. "Hey, I'm at the address you entered, but it seems off. Can you confirm the address?" I asked, hoping he just mistyped or something similar. He repeated the address, which was the same as on my GPS. Then he said something unexpected. "Wait, I think I see you." I looked up and forward, and there was a person waving at me from a distance on the road. I drove towards him, but my intuition told me something was off. I rolled down the window, and the man immediately started apologizing, saying the address can be tricky to find. He pointed behind him, saying his house was just up that road. The road he pointed to looked more like a half-finished dirt track through the forest. I smiled and said no worries, handing him the package. He smiled back, thanked me, and watched me as I turned around to get back on the road. I glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing the man still standing by the road, thinking how strange it all was. Less than a minute after driving off, I sensed something was wrong. My car started to bump and tilt to the right, the situation getting worse, and it felt dangerous to drive, so I had to stop. Before doing anything else, I called road assistance. I wasn't sure what the problem was, nor if it was related to that man, but my intuition told me not to take any risks. After hanging up, I got out to check the tires. My front right tire had burst, and that was the tire closest to where the man had been standing. I quickly connected the dots. After my car broke down, I felt an unexplainable unease. Sitting in the car, I looked around for any possible help, aware that I was now in a remote and hard-to-reach place. Despite my intuition telling me that the delivery customer might have had ill intentions, I still hoped it was just a coincidence. I tried to stay calm and checked my phone's signal. Luckily, it was decent. I decided to call my friends, telling them my location and what had happened. Although I didn't want to worry them, in this situation, I thought it was important for someone to know my exact whereabouts. I told them to call the police if I didn't update them after a while. As I was making the call, I noticed a figure in the distance continuing to approach me. His slow yet steady pace made me even more uneasy. Instinctively, I locked the car doors and turned on the interior lights, hoping to see the outside more clearly. Once the call connected, I briefly explained my situation to my friends, who immediately said they would come to find me. After hanging up, I tried to assess the situation. My car was in trouble, a stranger was approaching, and there was nothing around but trees and darkness. I decided not to get out of the car, as it could put me in even greater danger. I tried to remain calm, despite being full of fear. Just then, I saw a beam of light from a distance. It was a car. A glimmer of hope rose in my heart, thinking it might be a passing driver who had noticed me. The vehicle gradually approached, and I saw it was a pickup truck with apparently 2 people inside. They stopped behind my car and got out, walking towards me. I hurriedly rolled down the window a bit and told them I was in trouble. They asked about the specifics, and I briefly explained that my tire was punctured and pointed to the figure slowly approaching. They immediately offered to help and suggested I stay in the car. At that moment, the previous customer, who had been approaching, saw the people from the pickup truck and suddenly changed direction, starting to walk back. The driver of the pickup truck noticed his behavior and decided to stay with me until road assistance arrived. This gave me a considerable sense of relief. During the wait, I called the police and provided as detailed a description and account of the situation as possible. The police quickly arrived at the scene, asked me everything I knew, and began searching the area. My friends also arrived shortly after, and their presence was a great comfort to me. The road assistance team quickly addressed my car issue, and the police began investigating the identity and intentions of the mysterious man. Although they didn't find him immediately, they ensured I safely returned home and promised to continue the investigation. Reflecting on the incident later, I felt very fortunate that I was able to stay calm in that situation and make the right decisions. This experience taught me to always be vigilant in the face of potential danger and always be prepared to deal with emergencies. It was an unforgettable night in my high school life and a lesson I will never forget. During the summer of my second year in college, I worked as a waiter in a bustling city restaurant. This job was a whole new experience for me, filled with challenges and opportunities to learn every day. Most of my colleagues were lively and cheerful young people, and we managed to find fun amidst the busy work. Most of my work days were relatively normal, but one evening's experience remains unforgettable to this day. That night, the atmosphere in the restaurant was lively and cheerful, with the laughter and conversation of guests mingling together, creating a pleasant background noise. I was busy serving dishes and clearing tables. As I was about to take an order from a new group of customers, a man dressed in a neat suit entered the restaurant. His arrival seemed out of place in the bustling environment. He walked in alone, without friends or family, which was unusual during the busy dinner hours. He quickly and cautiously scanned the entire restaurant, seemingly looking for a specific person or a quiet corner to sit in. He chose a seat in a secluded corner of the restaurant, where the lighting was relatively dim and away from the view of most customers. After sitting down, he didn't seem in a hurry to order, but continued to observe his surroundings with an almost vigilant gaze. Whenever a waiter passed by or new customers entered the restaurant, he would temporarily stop looking around and then resume his observation. When I approached him to ask if he would like to order, I noticed that his response was somewhat nervous. He spoke in a low, reserved tone. He ordered a few dishes simply, but throughout the process, his gaze didn't really fall on the menu, as if he was thinking about something more important. His behavior made me feel a bit unusual and even somewhat uneasy. Normally, restaurant guests are attracted by the food and the pleasant atmosphere, focusing on conversations with their companions or enjoying their meals. But this gentleman didn't seem to be there to enjoy the food or seek leisure. He appeared to have a particular purpose, and this sense of mystery made me curious about him. After he finished ordering, he didn't relax and enjoy the wait for his food like other customers. Instead, his anxiety seemed to increase as time went by. He checked his watch from time to time and continued to observe his surroundings. All of this silently told me that something unusual was about to happen. I returned to the kitchen to convey his order, but the feeling of unease in my heart lingered. I tried to focus on my work while keeping an eye on the man. Soon, I noticed that he became increasingly restless in his seat, occasionally looking towards the restaurant entrance and other customers. As the night deepened, the atmosphere in the restaurant became more relaxed and pleasant. Guests were immersed in their meals and conversations, with laughter and the clinking of glasses echoing through the space. Against this backdrop, the restless demeanor of the man in the suit seemed extremely out of place. While I was busy serving another table, I caught a glimpse of the man suddenly standing up from the corner of my eye. His movement was quick and abrupt, almost decisive. He rapidly pulled an unidentified object from his pocket. At that moment, my heart seemed to leap into my throat. Alarm bells rang in my mind, and I immediately thought of the worst-case scenario. Could he have dangerous intentions? The entire restaurant seemed to fall silent in that instant. All movement and sound disappeared, leaving only the tense atmosphere between him and me. I hardly dared to breathe, silently praying for everything to be safe. I even began to recall the steps for handling emergencies that I learned during emergency training, ready to call for help or flee if necessary. But at that moment, the situation took a dramatic turn. I saw his tightly clenched hands slowly open, revealing a delicate little box. It was a ring box, and what he had pulled out of his pocket was just an ornately decorated engagement ring. My tension instantly turned into surprise and embarrassment. I realized how unfounded my imagination and worries had been. He quickly walked towards a lady in another corner of the restaurant, clearly a spot he had planned in advance. He knelt on one knee, opened the ring box, and proposed to the lady. In my heart, the initial tension and fear were replaced by warmth and emotion. The other guests in the restaurant soon realized what was happening and began to applaud, cheering for the couple's beautiful moment. This ordinary night became special and unforgettable due to the romantic proposal. At that moment, I deeply realized that life is always full of unexpected twists and surprises. This incident taught me not to jump to conclusions too quickly. Sometimes, patiently waiting for the truth to unfold can bring unexpected surprises and emotions.